The gleaming headquarters of Summit Technologies stood tall against the morning sky, its glass windows reflecting the sunrise like mirrors. Inside, the CEO's office on the top floor remained dark and empty. For the first time in 15 years, Mr. Singh wasn't sitting in his leather chair reviewing quarterly reports. Instead, he was in the basement, wearing a gray janitor's uniform that smelled faintly of mothballs. "Remember, you're just Ram the new janitor," he whispered to himself, adjusting the fake mustache that itched against his upper lip. After reading countless reports about declining employee satisfaction and increasing turnover rates, he knew spreadsheets couldn't tell the whole story. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes. The decision hadn't come easily. His board members had called it ridiculous, a CEO worth millions mopping floors and emptying trash cans. But something his grandmother used to say kept echoing in his mind: to understand the roots, you must dig in the soil yourself. As he pushed his cleaning cart through the dimly lit corridor, the morning shift workers began trickling in. A young woman rushed past him, coffee cup in hand, not sparing him a glance. In his expensive suits, people would scramble to hold doors open for him. Now, he was invisible. His first stop was the customer service department. As he emptied the trash bins, he noticed a team leader berating a new employee over a minor mistake. The young man's shoulders slumped as he endured the public humiliation. Mr. Singh's hand tightened around the trash bag. This wasn't the company culture he thought he'd built. In the break room, he wiped down tables as two senior managers discussed their teams. "Just pile more work on them," one said with a laugh. "What are they going to do, quit? In this economy?" The other joined in the laughter, neither noticing the janitor's hands pause mid-wipe. But it wasn't all darkness. In the IT department, he watched as developers shared their lunch with the cleaning staff, engaging them in friendly conversation. A supervisor stayed late helping a junior employee understand a complex project, despite having dinner plans with her family. By the end of his first day, his back ached from unaccustomed work. His expensive watch hidden under the uniform sleeve showed 7 p.m. As he stored his cleaning supplies in the janitor's closet, he realized something profound: he'd learned more about his company in one day of mopping floors than in months of executive meetings. In the solitude of his car, he removed the mustache and stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The CEO of Summit Technologies had disappeared into the shadows today, but Ram the janitor had seen the truth hiding in plain sight. This was just the beginning. He had 5 more days to go, and already, he knew things would never be the same. Little did he know, the most shocking discoveries were yet to come, and the changes he would implement would send ripples through the entire corporate world. Day 2 of Mr. Singh's undercover journey began in the accounts department, where the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry bees. Today, he'd switched from the night shift to early morning, arriving before dawn with dark circles under his eyes. These weren't drawn on with makeup, but real evidence of a sleepless night processing everything he'd witnessed the day before. As he polished the windows, a conversation between two accountants caught his attention. "Did you see that the company spent millions on that new executive lounge?" one whispered. "Meanwhile, they rejected our request for new office chairs. My back is killing me." Mr. Singh glanced at their chairs. The fabric was worn, the padding flat, and one had a wheel missing. He remembered approving the executive lounge renovation without a second thought, trusting his management team's recommendation about maintaining corporate image. The morning progressed, and he found himself in the call center. Here, the reality of frontline work hit him like a bucket of cold water. A middle-aged employee was trying to eat her breakfast while handling calls. There wasn't enough time during her official break. Another had a small pillow tucked behind her back, clearly struggling with the long sitting hours. The air conditioning barely reached this floor, and the summer heat was already building. "Ramji, could you help me?" called out one of the team leads, Mrs. Patel. Unlike others who barely acknowledged his existence, she always spoke to maintenance staff with respect. the water cooler is acting up again." As he worked on fixing it, she spoke to her team with genuine concern. "Take short breaks if you need them. Happy employees make happy customers." Mr. Singh made a mental note. Here was a leader who understood people, not just profits. During lunch, he cleaned the cafeteria while observing the natural groupings that formed. Senior management sat in their corner, junior employees in another, and middle management floating between, trying to belong somewhere. But what struck him most was the facilities staff eating alone in the corner, despite having worked at the company for years. He'd never noticed this invisible divide before. The afternoon brought him to the innovation department, where he discovered something that made his blood boil. A junior developer, barely out of college, was presenting a brilliant idea for improving customer service efficiency. Her immediate supervisor listened with feigned interest, only to later present the same idea to senior management as his own. The young developer's dejected face as she watched through the glass walls of the conference room told a story of crushed dreams and stolen credit. In the HR department, he overheard a concerning conversation about employee complaints being systematically buried. "The CEO doesn't need to know about every little thing," said one HR manager, casually dropping files into a drawer marked "resolved" without even reading them. Mr. Singh's hands trembled as he dusted the cabinets, fighting the urge to reveal himself right there. But the day wasn't without hope. In the tech support department, he witnessed a beautiful moment of solidarity. When one team member was struggling with a personal crisis, his colleagues quietly covered his calls, formed a protective circle around him, and gave him time to compose himself. No managers involved, no formal protocols, just human beings supporting each other. As evening approached, he found himself in a dimly lit corridor, mopping the same spot repeatedly as he processed the day's discoveries. A cleaning woman approached him, probably wondering why the new guy was so inefficient. "First week is always the hardest," she said kindly, showing him a better mopping technique. "I've been here 12 years. You'll get used to it." 12 years, he thought, and he'd never known her name until she introduced herself as Lakshmi. Back in his car that evening, Mr. Singh pulled out a small notebook where he'd been jotting down observations. The pages were filled with hastily scribbled notes: check AC in call center, review HR complaint procedures, employee recognition program needed, cafeteria seating, inclusion issue, chair replacement priority. But beyond these practical points, something deeper was troubling him. He'd built this company from the ground up, priding himself on creating a positive work culture. How had he become so disconnected? The weight of this realization felt heavier than any cleaning equipment he'd carried today. As he drove home, past families in parks and people heading to evening shifts, he realized that tomorrow would be even more challenging. He was scheduled to work in the departments known for the highest turnover rates. What would he discover there? The thought kept him awake long into the night, as he prepared for what promised to be the most revealing day yet of his undercover journey. Day 3 dawned with a sense of foreboding as Mr. Singh entered the departments with the highest turnover rates. His fingers had developed calluses from the cleaning equipment, and the janitor's uniform no longer felt like a costume, it had become a second skin. Today, he was assigned to the sales floor, where the company's most profitable deals were made, and coincidentally, where they lost the most employees. The morning sales huddle was already in progress when he began emptying trash bins. The sales director's voice boomed across the floor, "No excuses. If you're not hitting targets, you're not trying hard enough. There are hundreds of people who would kill for your position." The fear in the room was palpable, hanging heavy like storm clouds before rain. As he worked, he noticed a senior sales representative discreetly helping new team members. "Look," she whispered to a group of 3, showing them her client engagement notebook, "it's not about aggressive selling. Build relationships first. Here's what worked for me." Mr. Singh smiled behind his mustache. This was the kind of leadership the company needed, happening unofficially in the shadows. Mid-morning brought a disturbing scene. A young sales representative was crying in the break room, trying to hide her tears behind a coffee cup. Through quiet observation, he learned she'd lost a major deal despite working overtime for weeks. Instead of support or guidance, her manager had threatened to put her on a performance improvement plan. The same manager was now in his office, boasting loudly on the phone about his team's sink or swim culture. During lunch, he cleaned the sales floor's meeting rooms, discovering post-it notes forgotten on whiteboards and scraps of paper in bins. They told a story different from the official reports: impossible targets, constantly moving goalposts, and a toxic competitive environment that pitted colleagues against each other. One crumpled note read, "Third weekend in a row. Kids' recital missed again. Is it worth it?" But the most shocking revelation came in the afternoon. While fixing a blocked sink in the restroom, he overheard two sales managers discussing their strategy. They were deliberately assigning newer employees to the toughest territories, setting them up for failure to justify lower commissions and eventual termination. Churn and burn, they called it with casual cruelty. Keeps the salary budget in check. The day took an unexpected turn when the air conditioning system broke down. As temperatures rose, he watched how different people handled the crisis. Junior employees suffered in silence, afraid to complain. Middle managers made a show of calling maintenance repeatedly. But one floor manager surprised everyone by buying electric fans with her own money and distributing water bottles to her team. In the late afternoon, he witnessed a quiet act of rebellion. A group of experienced sales representatives had created an unofficial mentoring system. They met in the parking lot during breaks, sharing tips, leads, and emotional support. They called themselves the Survival Club, and he noticed that members of this informal group had the lowest turnover rates in their departments. The most poignant moment came near closing time. He was mopping near the sales director's office when a senior sales representative walked in to resign. Through the glass walls, he watched as the man, who'd given 8 years to the company, was dismissed with a wave of the hand. No exit interview, no acknowledgement of his contributions, not even a proper goodbye. The man's family photo was still on his desk when security arrived to escort him out. As he cleaned that empty desk later, Mr. Singh found a letter the departed employee had written but never sent. It detailed years of dedication, innovative ideas that were ignored, and a gradual descent into disillusionment. The letter ended with a line that would haunt him: "I didn't leave because I failed the company, I left because the company failed its people." Back in the janitor's closet, organizing supplies for the next day, he met Lakshmi again. She noticed his troubled expression. "Heavy thoughts for a janitor," she said wisely. "Sometimes the dirtiest things we clean aren't the floors." Her words struck him. How many other wisdom-filled conversations had he missed by staying in his executive bubble? That night, in his home office, Mr. Singh couldn't sleep. He pulled out the company's mission statement, framed in expensive wood: "People first, profits follow." The words now seemed to mock him. His company had lost its way, or perhaps he had lost his way as a leader. The sales floor's aggressive culture wasn't built in a day, it had grown unchecked under his watch, while he attended executive retreats and chased quarterly targets. He thought about the Survival Club, the quiet mentors, the floor manager with her electric fans. These were the real leaders, emerging naturally from the ranks. Meanwhile, some of those he'd promoted to power were creating a culture of fear and exploitation. Tomorrow would bring him to the production floor, where physical labor met tight deadlines. His muscles already ached from 3 days of, but he knew the real pain wasn't physical. It was the weight of responsibility, the recognition that every policy he'd signed off on, every manager he'd promoted, every decision he'd delegated had real consequences for real people. As he prepared for bed, his phone buzzed with an email from the board about quarterly projections. For the first time in his career, he left it unread. Tomorrow's discoveries, he suspected, would require his full attention, and he had a feeling they would reshape not just his company, but his entire understanding of leadership. Day 4 brought Mr. Singh to the production floor, where the company's products came to life. The industrial-sized doors opened to a world of whirring machines and busy hands. His cleaning cart squeaked against the concrete floor as he entered, the sound lost in the mechanical symphony of the factory floor. The morning shift had just begun, and already he could see the toll it took on the workers. Safety gear that had seen better days, chairs that creaked ominously, and ventilation that struggled to keep up with the heat from the machines. He remembered signing off on the last budget review. Maintenance costs had been cut to meet quarterly targets. As he cleaned around the assembly lines, he noticed an older worker teaching a newcomer how to operate machinery more safely than the official manual suggested. 20 years on this line taught me a few things, the veteran worker said quietly. This way, your back won't hurt as much by day's end. Mr. Singh watched as they modified their movement slightly, working smarter rather than harder. The official training had missed these crucial details that made the difference between surviving and thriving. Mid-morning brought an incident that made his heart race. A machine malfunctioned, sending sparks flying. The floor supervisor's first reaction wasn't to check on his team's safety. Instead, he rushed to calculate the production delay. We'll have to work through lunch to make up for this, he announced, even as workers coughed from the smoke. Mr. Singh's hand tightened around his mop handle, remembering the recent board meeting where they'd celebrated reduced maintenance costs as a win. During what should have been the lunch break, he witnessed something remarkable. Workers took turns eating, creating an unofficial rotation system so the line wouldn't stop. Those eating shared their food with those working, creating a small moment of community in the midst of pressure. One worker noticed him cleaning nearby and called out, "Ram Bhai, come join us." The simple gesture of inclusion nearly brought tears to his eyes. The afternoon revealed another layer of issues. A group of workers were discussing their concerns about chemical exposure in whispers. "My doctor says these headaches aren't normal," one said. "But HR says our safety levels are within acceptable ranges." Another chimed in, "My uniform's been damaged by these chemicals for months, but they won't replace it until the scheduled date." Mr. Singh remembered the hefty bonus the safety compliance officer had received for keeping costs down. But amidst these troubling discoveries, he found signs of incredible resilience and innovation. A group of workers had created their own quality control system, checking each other's work informally. Their line had the lowest defect rates in the factory, though official reports credited this to management's oversight. Another worker had designed a simple tool modification that reduced strain on their wrists, sharing it quietly with colleagues while management remained oblivious to this grassroots innovation. Late afternoon brought a visit from corporate, a young executive in an expensive suit, tablet in hand, walking through with the floor manager. "Your productivity numbers need to improve," the executive declared, never looking up from his screen. "Other facilities are showing better metrics." Mr. Singh recognized his younger self in that executive, focused on numbers, blind to the human element that made those numbers possible. As the day wound down, he was cleaning the locker room when he found a notebook fallen behind a bench. It contained hand-drawn diagrams of process improvements, safety modifications, and efficiency ideas, a treasure trove of shop floor wisdom that had never made it up the chain of command. The last page held a simple question: does anyone up there care about down here? The evening shift was starting as he finished his rounds. A worker rushed in, clearly distressed. Her child care had fallen through, and she faced choosing between leaving her kids alone or missing work and risking her job. He watched as her colleagues quickly rearranged their schedules to cover for her, creating a solution out of solidarity. The floor supervisor turned a blind eye, perhaps the only kind thing he'd seen him do all day. In the maintenance closet, organizing his supplies, Mr. Singh found a wall where workers had written their names and years of service. Some span stretched across decades, entire careers spent on these floors, building the company's success one product at a time. He recognized none of the names, though their work had built his fortune. That night, sitting in his home study, he reviewed the company's recent awards: excellence in corporate leadership, innovation in management, best place to work. The glass trophies caught the lamplight, but their shine seemed dulled by what he now knew. The real excellence, innovation, and work culture lived on the shop floor, uncelebrated and often actively suppressed. He thought about the unofficial training program, the shared lunches, the innovative tools, the collaborative quality control, all happening despite the system, not because of it. The factory workers had created a parallel organization, one built on mutual support and practical wisdom, while his official organization charted metrics and celebrated numbers without context. As he prepared for his 5th day undercover, his phone buzzed with messages from the board about an upcoming Leadership Excellence Award he was scheduled to receive. The irony wasn't lost on him. Outside his window, the city lights blinked in the distance, and he thought about the night shift workers just starting their day at his factory. Tomorrow would take him to the shipping department, where products began their journey to customers. But the most important journey, he realized, was the one happening in his own understanding of what leadership truly meant. His back ached from the day's work, his hands were calloused, and his expensive watch, still hidden under his uniform sleeve, felt like it belonged to another person entirely. In just 4 days, he'd learned more about leadership than in 20 years of running the company. And he knew that day 5 would bring even more revelations that would challenge everything he thought he knew about success in business. Day 5 brought Mr. Singh to the shipping department, where the company's products began their journey to customers worldwide. The warehouse stretched before him like a small city, with forklifts moving through makeshift streets and workers navigating endless rows of shelves. His mop and bucket felt familiar now, almost like old friends. The morning started with a safety briefing that nobody seemed to take seriously. The supervisor read from a wrinkled paper, his voice monotone, while workers checked their phones or dozed off. Mr. Singh noticed the safety equipment storage was poorly maintained, several harnesses looked worn, and some hard hats were cracked. Yet the department had received awards for safety compliance. As he cleaned near the loading docks, he witnessed a scene that made him question everything about his company's efficiency metrics. Workers were rushing to load trucks faster than was safe, driven by an unrealistic scheduling system. "The computer says we should finish each truck in 30 minutes, one worker explained to another. The computers never loaded a truck in summer heat. Mid-morning brought an unexpected discovery. In a corner of the warehouse, he found a makeshift break area workers had created. Unlike the official break room with its harsh lighting and broken vending machines, this space had personal touches, photos of families, shared snacks, even a small fan someone had brought from home. "Sometimes you need a place where you can breathe," a worker told him, offering him a chair and a cup of chai. The real eye-opener came when he overheard a conversation between 2 longtime employees. They were discussing how the new inventory management system, implemented at great expense, was actually making their jobs harder. "We used to know where everything was," one said. "Now we waste hours following the computer's illogical routing." Yet they developed their own system, marking locations with subtle signs only they understood, creating efficiency despite the official system rather than because of it. During lunch, he witnessed something that showed him the true cost of corporate policies. A worker received a call that his child was sick at school, but he couldn't leave. The new attendance policy meant he'd lose his quarterly bonus, which his family depended on. His colleagues quietly organized themselves to cover his work, creating an unofficial support system that the company's expensive HR programs had failed to provide. The afternoon revealed another layer of untapped wisdom. A group of workers had created an informal training program for new hires, teaching them how to handle different package types efficiently and safely. Their method was far more effective than the official training videos, but when they tried to suggest improvements, management had dismissed them. What could floor workers know about training, they'd been told. As he cleaned the shipping office, he observed the stark contrast between the air-conditioned space where supervisors worked and the sweltering warehouse floor. On the supervisor's desk, he noticed a report about rising shipping errors. Yet just outside, he'd watched workers struggle with broken scanners and malfunctioning printers, their requests for new equipment repeatedly denied to control costs. The most powerful moment came late in the day. A major customer had complained about damaged deliveries, and management was hunting for someone to blame. But instead of pointing fingers, the workers gathered to solve the problem. They identified the real issue: the new packaging materials were inferior, chosen for cost savings rather than protection. They'd been reporting this for months, their concerns lost in layers of management. In the final hours of his shift, he helped clean up after a minor spill. Working alongside other cleaning staff, he heard their stories, of dreams put on hold, of children in college they could barely afford, of second jobs and side hustles. Yet they spoke with pride about keeping the facility clean and safe, understanding their role in the larger mission even if the company didn't recognize it. As evening approached, he witnessed a quiet ceremony. A worker was retiring after 25 years, and his colleagues had organized a small celebration in their makeshift break area. There was no official recognition, no gold watch, no executive speech, just genuine appreciation from the people who'd worked beside him. They presented him with a card they'd all signed and a tool belt they'd pitched in to buy. The man's eyes welled up as he said, "This place wasn't always perfect, but you people made it worth it." Back in his car that evening, Mr. Singh's hands shook as he removed his disguise. He thought about the retirement ceremony he'd attended last month for a vice president, the expensive dinner, the elaborate speeches, the generous package. The contrast was stark and telling. His phone contained dozens of missed calls and messages about tomorrow's board meeting, where he was supposed to present the company's new efficiency initiatives. The irony felt heavy: he'd spent millions on consultants and systems, while the real expertise lived on his warehouse floor, unheard and unvalued. Tomorrow would be his final day undercover, taking him to the maintenance department, where Lakshmi and others kept the facility running. His muscles ached less now, adapted to the physical work, but his heart ached more with each new discovery. He'd built his company from the ground up, but he'd lost touch with the very ground he'd started from. As he drove home through the evening traffic, he passed the company's billboard featuring its slogan, "Building Tomorrow Together." He now understood that "together" had become a hollow word. The company split between those who made decisions and those who lived with their consequences. But in the unofficial networks of support, the hidden innovations, and the quiet acts of solidarity, he'd seen what "together" could really mean. His final day approached, and with it, the weight of decisions to come. The changes needed weren't just about policies or procedures, they required a fundamental rethinking of what it meant to be a leader, a company, a community. As he prepared for bed, he looked at his CEO parking spot placard, still sitting on his desk where he'd left it 5 days ago. Tomorrow would bring the final pieces of the puzzle, but the picture was already becoming clear, and it looked very different from the one hanging in his executive office. The final day of Mr. Singh's undercover journey began in the maintenance department, where he would work alongside Lakshmi and her team. The morning air was thick with the smell of industrial cleaners and machine oil. His hands, now calloused and steady, gripped the familiar cleaning tools one last time. The day started with the maintenance team's morning meeting, held in a cramped room filled with cleaning supplies and repair equipment. Unlike the executive meetings in their pristine conference rooms, this gathering hummed with practical purpose. The team discussed broken equipment, safety concerns, and areas needing immediate attention. They spoke in a mix of languages, switching effortlessly between them, united by their shared mission to keep the facility running. As he worked alongside Lakshmi, she shared wisdom that no business school had ever taught him. "You see that stain?" She pointed to a corner. "Sometimes the hardest spots to clean are the ones people walk past every day, pretending not to see." The metaphor wasn't lost on him. How many problems in his company had become invisible simply because people had grown used to them? Mid-morning brought a crisis that showed him true leadership in action. A major water pipe burst, threatening to flood the production floor. While managers rushed to make phone calls and document the incident, the maintenance team sprang into action. They had anticipated such problems and had developed their own emergency protocols. Within hours, they had contained the flood and prevented hundreds of thousands in potential damage. Yet in the official report, they would remain unnamed, their expertise unrecognized. During lunch, taken in quick shifts to maintain coverage, he listened as the team shared stories of their decades of service. One member had put 3 children through college on a maintenance salary, working extra shifts and saving every penny. Another spoke of arriving as an immigrant 20 years ago, learning English during night shifts while cleaning offices. Their stories were the real company history, yet none would ever appear in corporate presentations. The afternoon brought him to the building's mechanical heart, the boiler room. Here, ancient equipment was kept running through ingenuity and determination. The maintenance team had created detailed manuals in multiple languages, sharing knowledge that the official documentation missed. They'd developed their own preventive maintenance schedule, more effective than the expensive system the company had purchased but never properly implemented. As the day progressed, Mr. Singh found himself in the executive floor bathrooms, the same ones he'd used countless times as CEO. Now, cleaning them, he noticed the small signs of care, the carefully folded toilet paper edges, the spotless mirrors, the fresh flowers Lakshmi brought from her garden. Even if they don't see us, she had told him, we see our own work. Her pride wasn't tied to recognition but to personal standards of excellence. Late afternoon brought the moment that would cement his transformation. During a routine cleaning task, he overheard 2 executives discussing the upcoming board meeting. They were planning to propose further cuts to maintenance and facility staff, presenting it as operational optimization. One joked about how they could blame increased workplace accidents on worker carelessness rather than reduced maintenance. Standing there in his janitor's uniform, Mr. Singh felt the full weight of his responsibility. As evening approached, his final task was helping to clean the company's lobby. The space was dominated by a wall of awards and achievements, plaques, trophies, and framed certificates celebrating corporate excellence. But now he saw what was missing: no recognition for the people who literally kept the company standing, no awards for the quiet heroes who solved daily crises, no celebration of the wisdom found in break rooms and boiler rooms. In the maintenance office, preparing to end his final shift, he watched Lakshmi review the day's tasks with her team. She knew each person's strengths, understood their challenges, and distributed work accordingly. She was practicing the kind of leadership he'd paid consultants millions to teach his executives, yet her wisdom had been invisible to the company's official hierarchy. The moment to reveal himself had come. As the team gathered for their end-of-day meeting, Mr. Singh removed his disguise. The shock in the room was palpable, but Lakshmi's eyes showed something else: understanding. We wondered how long it would take for someone up there to really see us, she said quietly. Standing before them not as a CEO but as someone who had worked alongside them, he shared his discoveries and his shame at how disconnected he'd become. He spoke of the changes to come, not promises made from an executive office, but commitments born from shared experience. The next morning, he walked into the board meeting still wearing his janitor's uniform. The shocked faces of board members and executives greeted him as he took his place at the head of the table. "Gentlemen," he began, "we need to talk about what excellence really means in our company." The changes he announced that day were sweeping. The maintenance team's unofficial manuals would become official company resources. Worker-developed safety protocols would replace the ineffective corporate procedures. A new board position would be created, filled by someone from the front lines. Every executive would spend time working alongside frontline staff, not as a one-time exercise, but as an ongoing practice. Most importantly, he established a Ground Truth Council, a rotating group of frontline workers who would have direct input into company decisions. Lakshmi would lead the first council, bringing decades of wisdom to the executive level. The company's bonus structure was revamped, tying executive compensation to worker well-being as much as to financial metrics. In the months that followed, these changes met resistance from those comfortable with the old system. Some executives resigned, unwilling to adapt to the new culture. But gradually, something remarkable happened. Productivity improved, not through top-down pressure but through bottom-up innovation. Worker satisfaction increased, turnover decreased, and the company began winning awards that, for the first time, felt genuinely deserved. 1 year later, Mr. Singh stood in the company lobby, now transformed. The wall of corporate awards had been replaced by photographs and stories of employees at all levels. Lakshmi's picture held a central place, her quiet wisdom finally recognized. The company's new slogan, suggested by a shipping worker, read, "Built by all, success for all." But perhaps the most significant change was in himself. The expensive suits still hung in his closet, but they no longer defined him. Every morning, he spent time walking the floors, not as a disguised janitor or a distant CEO, but as someone who had learned that true leadership means seeing, hearing, and valuing every person who contributes to success. The story of his undercover journey spread through the industry, inspiring other leaders to question their own assumptions about success and leadership. But for Mr. Singh, the real measure of success wasn't in the publicity or praise, it was in the transformed culture of his company, where every voice mattered and every contribution was valued. As he walked through the facility that evening, he passed the maintenance office where his journey had begun. Lakshmi was there, training a new team member. She caught his eye and smiled, both of them knowing that sometimes the greatest changes start with the simple act of seeing what was invisible before. The end.